The first 100 days after acquiring a business will define the next 5 years of running it. Every operator knows this. But what does that actually mean in practice? What do you do on day one? Who do you talk to first? And how do you decide what to change and what to protect before you fully understand it either? Julian Beckh started his career at Goldman Sachs. He left to become a self-funded searcher and at the age of 25 acquired Behälter KG Bremen, a 60-year-old specialist in stainless steel tanks and industrial process equipment, serving customers in the chemical, pharmaceutical and food industries across Germany and internationally. He has been running the business for 9 years. Along the way, he has participated in further searcher-led acquisitions, moving from operator to investor and bringing what he had learned in his own first 100 days to the deals that followed. Most operators get one shot at getting this right. Julian has done it repeatedly and has 9 years of hindsight on what has worked, what broke, and what he would do completely different today. Julian, welcome to Lineage. Most people think the first 100 days start on the day you take over the company. But your view is that the most important work actually happens before that. What do you do before day one that most succession entrepreneurs neglect?
I think it's super important to be aware of the mental shift that you have to be facing. Until the day of closing the transaction, you are a super investor-oriented guy, right? You are facing financials, you're structuring the deal, and then afterwards, from day one onwards, basically, you are really an operator, which means you are in charge of people, you are in charge of operations, you are in charge of value creation. So that's a huge change and shift of focus and mental aspect. What you can do before you get going, I think, is to draft a little communication script. What's the key message you want to send to the team? How do you want to be perceived? Because communication really is key when entering this new entrepreneurial ecosystem. And what I've also done is to build up a sort of knowledge inventory, right? Because when you're actually on the job, you get routine blinded very quickly, right? Your day-to-day routines eat you up and you'll just be blind at some point. So what I did, I basically challenged my network, and coming from a banking background, I was completely blind on, let's say, online marketing elements, CRM tools, a lot of these super important elements that I had no previous knowledge about. So I used that time wisely before day one to level up my skills in all of these aspects to be maximum prepared and take this knowledge inventory with me.
I want to touch base on that as we go through kind of the 100-day period at Behälter KG in a second. You mentioned the communication script. What was the key messages that you wanted to send back in the day?
I think I really wanted to present myself as this down-to-earth person that is naturally intrigued by the business model, that really wants to get his hands dirty in working together with the team and diving into these operations and improving the company for good, bringing this legacy of the previous owner into the next generation and not being perceived as an investor that is juggling with numbers and doesn't care about much else.
Now, you are inheriting a team, a culture, and a set of relationships that were built around someone else over decades. How do you actually understand what you're walking into and what happened to you when you took over Behälter KG?
Yeah, so I actually had a very unexpected start and I wasn't able to prepare for this. Funny enough, on the 1st of April 2017, I had my first day as CEO of Behälter KG. And on my laptop, there was a little note that said, "I'm glad you're in the team. I'm so relieved to have found you that I went on vacation." And there was a note from the seller. So basically, I had my desk, I had my first working day, and I was actually completely on my own. And it was, a little shocking in the beginning. But I took it as a chance, and I thought, okay, how should I tackle this, right? I'm not actually very informed on my tasks that I should assume, and I wasn't even sure how to address the employees, right? Should I go the formal way? Should I rather do it informal? I somehow listened to my gut feeling. I went on our CRM system, and I randomly picked some of our most recent clients, introduced myself as the new CEO, and ask them for true feedback on what they wish could change in the company going forward, what they think differentiates us as a company. And I gained super valuable input on differentiating factors of our company that I completely wasn't aware during the due diligence phase. Also marketing efforts that we did in the past that we stopped doing that the clients actually very appreciated. Also, I listened to my gut feeling, the way I was shaped during my previous career path, and I went very informal with all employees, right? I introduced myself as the, let's say, the go-to boss that you don't have to worry about brain teasing in any kind of way. It was completely different to what my, let's say, business successor actually afterwards had wished me to do so. But I'm super excited the way it went. And this was nothing that I could have prepared for in the due diligence phase for sure.
You haven't met anyone of the team, right, during the due diligence phase?
No, I had phone conversations with one or two people, but apart from that, it was super anonymous, and it was a cold jump. I met most of them on the first day.
So were they aware that there is now a new owner at the time you were 25? Did not somebody wanted to kick you out, or did they just like listen to you? How did it play out?
Yeah, that's a question I actually frequently get when speaking to other succession entrepreneurs. I was super young back then. I was 25. And I was the new boss, let's call it this way. And people always ask me, are they even taking you serious? You're probably the youngest in the team. That was actually the case. But interestingly, in practice, it has played a much smaller role than people would expect, or actually no role at all. And also in other deals that I've structured since then, in the last 9 years, the same has been true, right? That age doesn't really matter. In the end, this company that I bought was going through a transition. The previous owner was sick, and he was not in a position anymore to lead the company forward. And there was a clear need for someone to step in and take responsibility and provide direction. In situations like these, age is of secondary importance, right? And in most companies of this size, there has also been a discussion if there is anyone internally that is willing and able to step up and assume responsibility and become the new CEO, right? And then typically this answer is no, there is no one if the company is then being marketed and sold. So this creates a natural gap. And if you step into this with clarity and commitment and willingness to become the new CEO and operator, then this is what really matters, and age is irrelevant. So actually, it has rather helped me in some of my previous succession opportunities, because the older generation is actually quite appreciative of younger people stepping in, being willing to assume responsibility, work hard.
With regards to the old outgoing owner, how do you structure the handover to extract kind of the necessary information? And how did you draw the information that you needed without creating maybe too much dependency on him?
I was fortunate and unfortunate in both ways in parallel, I would say, because my previous business partner was quite sick, suffering from Parkinson's disease, and he took a lot of heavy prescription medicine, which means he changed mood frequently. And he gave me advice in the morning to do something this way, and then in the night, the evening, he revoked this piece of advice and went completely in the opposite route. But he was completely transparent with me from the beginning onwards that this will be the case, and I will just have to choose which way is right for me. How we actually structured it, we had a super intense 24/7 handover in the beginning that went on for, let's say, 2, 3, 4 weeks. But given that he was quite sick and he wasn't in the office for too many days or hours a week, I actually started to rely much more on the knowledge from team members and sought advice from them and tried to become very independent from the previous owner at an early stage. And that's actually also an advice I would share, to rather rely on the knowledge that you have in the team and maybe the secondary management level, and try to take decisions from there. Try to swim by yourself from a relatively early point in time, instead of relying on advice for too long and eventually missing to have a proper handover. But honestly, in the last few succession situations that I've been part of, it has actually never been a real issue. Most business owners are a bit afraid that a succession know-how transfer cannot take place in a year or so. But according to my experience, to be honest, 3 intensive months are already a good amount of time. Maybe then you have a 3 or 6 month follow-up cool-down period. But everything else afterwards maybe is a sort of advisor role for 1 or 2 calls a week on some aspects, but short, crisp, and intense succession know-how transfer is absolutely doable.
Is that something you actively pitch to the old sellers? Like, is this now your standard playbook that you would have in mind when taking over a business?
Yeah, for sure. And it also gives comfort to sellers when I tell them, listen, you want to get out of here and maximum 1 year of handover is being offered. And when I tell them, I'm super relaxed about it because I have 3 or 4 or 5 proof points that this works out very well and that for sure I won't need longer than a year, much more realistically less than 6 months or so. That gives them a lot of comfort as well because they cannot really grasp what time frame is realistic, what is needed, because most likely it's their first sale ever. So giving them a bit of comfort on these experience points, what the knowledge transfer relates, that's for sure part of the playbook for new and upcoming succession opportunities.
If you think about the different business aspects, what are areas where you feel like, hey, this is something where the knowledge of the previous owner has proven to be very valuable and useful? And are there other functional areas where it has been less so, where you needed just to figure it out yourself?
I think it depends a lot on which areas the previous owner has been active in mostly. In my specific case, in our business model, purchasing is a super relevant aspect. And he was the head of purchasing. And he was also the only person that was purchasing because he never wanted to give away this special skill. So, of course, for me, it was number 1 priority to become the new head of purchasing and take on all knowledge that he had in this specific field. Yeah, for sure, this was the point where I was most cautious about in, picking this up and trying to make it right when he was giving me very different signals on a specific question I had in mind. And then on all other aspects where I knew the know-how base in our company is spread out on more shoulders, I was more relaxed about him giving me, let's say, not a very clear advice at all times.
In the first 30 days, what have you done or how did you act in order to get a good grasp of the company?
I think there is a tendency or an instinct of a new owner to demonstrate leadership too quickly. And this is probably quite natural because you want to show you are in charge, you are 100% laser focused, motivated, and you just want to get things right. But I think it's very, very important to be aware that these first days in the company, this can actually be a very counterintuitive element if you change things too quickly, because in the end this business complex is much more complex than it might look from a due diligence point of view, right? I mean, with a business partner of mine, we purchased a company that is manufacturing electric steam generators, and coming from a banking background, it's actually quite a steep learning case to understand the challenges of building electric steam generators on a day-to-day basis. So the first 30 days and also beyond that, it's actually much more important, in my opinion, to be curious and to explore what are the challenges of the company, how are things being done. And maybe in the first 30 days, you might discover a few elements that look like a low-hanging potential to immediately fix. But these processes might look inefficient, but they might exist for a reason. And by moving on too quickly to eliminate these aspects, it might have unintended consequences that you don't even fully understand in the first 30 days. So you should be quite active in the first 30 days, but not in changing things, rather in asking questions, in being curious, in spending time with people, in understanding customers, and essentially building your own view of the business.
Do you have like a certain set of questions you like to ask people in those scenarios? Any, questions that have given you the right information now in hindsight?
Difficult to prepare for this, but I mean, what I did to try to not miss anything, I really did spend time in every department. So I basically did a 1-day internship with pretty much every function that we have in the company, sitting with the team, observing how they work, understanding the daily tasks, the challenges, where they see potential, where they see pain points, and that gave me a much more authentic picture on the status quo than any formal assessment during the due diligence phase can ever give you. And then to even build on that, and it probably also depends a bit on the team size that you find yourself in. I actually scheduled one-to-one lunches with every single employee, from, let's say, the head of purchasing up to our crane driver or our quality control department. And this was something that never happened before, right? I mean, there's team lunches every now and then, but the former CEO never went to lunch with, let's say, every single employee. And
how many lunches were those in your case?
A bit more than I could manage in the first month, but I think it was like 20 lunches, plus or minus. And it sent a super strong signal, because people noticed, okay, he's actually really interested. It's not a facade. He's actually really wanting to understand how things work, and they allowed me to understand who are these people and who is this person behind their role, what motivates them, what frustrates them, and how do they see the company, right? What potentials have they identified that I haven't noticed so far? What I noticed is that people were super appreciative of this and opened up, and it also helped to grow myself much quicker into this, let's say, team dynamic than I imagined.
Do you remember some conversation with the employees where a person who looks like a problem had later turned out to ultimately be an asset to the company, only after you've been curious and listened to them?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you enter this company ecosystem, you come with a big basket full of ideas, and there's always a few people that are supportive. They like the new input, but then there's also always a few people that are skeptical, right? They have a lot of criticism, but I actually noticed that this is also quite an asset, right? Because you don't want to have people around you that are supportive of any new initiative bringing on the table. It's actually super valuable to have people around you that are equipped with, let's say, thought criticism, right? So they challenge you, they ask the right questions that may make you maybe rethink. It might feel like resistance, but in the end, it's a super important sparring mode that you don't want to miss. So some people might look like a problem, right? They're resistant, they don't want change, but there might be a reason why a specific change doesn't make sense. And it's actually quite an asset to have people like this around you and develop ideas and visions together with them.
So don't take feedback or criticism in this instant not personally right away, but rather reflect on them in order to see how it fits into the bigger picture. Do you actually remember like a concrete example where somebody criticized you or where you felt resistance, but it turned out to actually be the right way after reconsidering or thinking through it?
Yeah, I have one specific person in mind when I think about it, and he's like the technical expert in all aspects of stainless steel tanks. And when we market these, sometimes the descriptions are super lengthy, and there's a sort of disclaimer to a lot of statements. And my idea was, why not erase all these disclaimers? It reads much nicer if the technical descriptions are short and crisp. But basically informed me quite transparently about legal risks and previous issues we had with clients, and that it might be a risk that we shouldn't want to assume to eliminate these things, which, you know, from a marketing perspective made sense, but from a technical legal perspective didn't make a lot of sense. So today I'm super thankful for having him here, and being quite often skeptic, let's say, changes I bring on the table, but every now and then, or most often actually, I manage to convince him as well, and we somehow find a way that that bridges his constructive criticism and my idea forward.
Mm. The theme that I've heard so far is communication, right? To the old owner, with the old owner, but then also to the team. Now, what do you actually say to the team in the first week when you take over a business and are faced with now managing 30, 50, 100 employees?
I would say communication is really the most important thing which you have to get right in the first 30 days. No one is looking for strategy in the beginning, right? People are focused on who is this person. They want reassurance. They want to build up trust. And I mean, typically employees, they want to understand, is my job safe? Is this new person respecting what we've built? Is he actually naturally intrigued by what we're doing? Is maybe everything going to be different tomorrow? I think it's super important to present yourself down to earth as being one of them, as being super interested in what they've built, in building on it, in growing together, in optimizing for the benefit of all. I've also one anecdote where this went rather in the wrong direction. So I bought this company 2 years ago, Bredo Doppelboden, which builds raised access floor systems for data centers. There it was a bit more tricky from the communication point of view, because I bought this company more as an investor and less as an operator, because I have a managing director that is handling the day-to-day operations, and I'm more the sparings partner and investor in the background. The previous owner of the company basically informed everyone in a team meeting that he sold the company to an investor. And immediately people were extremely shocked, like, oh, wow, what is this? We've been a family business so far. Now we're owned by an investor. Who is this guy? So what I did was I drove down there very quickly, and we had a big let's say, breakfast meeting where I could introduce myself and where I could present my strategic rationale, how I want to develop the company from an investor point of view, but with an operator mentality and as an, let's say, an entrepreneur myself. So yeah, I could fix this, but it was a little bit rough to fix it after this first shock. As I said, I think communication really is key. It's one of the most important elements that you have to get right when entering your new company ecosystem in the first 30 days.
Was it something that you forgot to communicate back then, or did you think about it, but then the old owner or managing director still went ahead and felt like, hey, this is what I need to communicate?
Yeah, it was like we had this notary appointment, and I mean, the most important people in the company were informed at least, but somehow maybe he felt so relieved, I'm not even sure, but he just communicated this by himself. It wasn't really communicated between us both how to inform the team, and for sure I would have done it a bit different. We fixed it in the end, but it is extremely important to have a clear communication strategy between seller and buyer.
One of our searchers who acquired, the owner basically gathered the meeting himself and just followed his own communication playbook, even though it was kind of addressed, but something that ultimately you should control, but be prepared for something to go wrong as well. And have a contingency plan in place in order to calm the employee base. Now, we are talking about a scenario that you spent the first 30 days listening, observing, and learning. But at some point, you want to make a change as well, because we have identified during the due diligence process that there are ideally a lot of areas where we feel like we can improve the business going forward. What makes a good first change in your opinion?
I think a first good change should be a change that is not too disruptive. And I think the best early changes are improvements that are already in the head of the team, right? That exist, but somehow there was never time to implement them. And that's actually also exactly what naturally happened in my first business handover with Behälter KG. When doing my one-day internship in every department, I took away a lot of potentials that they had identified, but they just didn't know how to implement them. So I took this as homework. to see how to improve these clear potentials that had been identified already, that were not too disruptive, not too big, but simple, small steps that move things ahead day by day by a little. So it was, improving a little thing in our factoring process. It was a clear strategy on how to stop printing out everything. Back then, we had lots of paper, and I basically came up with a good way on how to cut this very quickly. And then when the team noticed that these little changes work and my ideas, they can become implemented, then you can also go on with a bit bigger aspects.
What would you say is something like an existing organization can actually absorb in terms of small changes?
I think it depends if these are changes for the entire organization or just changes department by department. In my specific situations, it was more changes the departments. So there were a few smaller changes, but the first change was just for order handling. The second change was just for sales. The third change was just for quality control. So I basically implemented this change just with these individual teams. And I would be rather on the slow side and not go too big.
Are there areas where you feel like every new succession entrepreneur taking over a business to look into? Because based on your experience, it's just something that has typically not been improved.
I mean, from my experience, implementing a CRM system is just fundamental for managing a business. And there's a lot of companies out there that don't have one. A lot of businesses also lack fundamental, let's say, online marketing skills. Maybe there's one person that makes sure 1,000 euros are spent on Google Ads a month, but he doesn't actually know how and when and where. It has always been that way. That's actually like the anecdote from my first succession. There was 1,000 euros spent a month because you don't want to invest more in this big US giant. And then, of course, we changed this quite quickly in identifying which amount of euros do we want to spend per lead. Actually, it helped a lot to build up my knowledge inventory and have a few very good conversations with people from my network that are subject matter experts in all these elements that I wasn't really an expert in, to then go into this ecosystem here and bring in these new ideas, because often these mid-cap businesses, they are successful in what they're doing, but they have, let's say, a little tunnel vision in key focus areas, such as marketing, such as how do we negotiate with suppliers and so on. So I think there's a ton of potential in really probably every division. I think on a more general basis, it's very important to not enforce too many changes too fast, and especially against the opinion of your team. It's very important to be aware that entrepreneurship through acquisition is a marathon. It's not a sprint. So you're in there for a lot of years, maybe forever. So the biggest mistake in the first 100 days is believing that you need to prove yourself and that you're the smartest person in the room. In the reality, your job is to build up trust and become the best listener in the room.
Now, after you listen to your team, what if you realize that you inherited someone who you believe who is not fit for the role that you have envisioned? How do you handle it?
That's also a very common theme for a lot of mid-cap companies, I believe. I've seen that in a lot of previous experiences, that, the assistant at some point gets promoted to take over sales. And then after 10 years, she actually becomes maybe co-head of sales. But this person never really did a sales training. So it can be quite often the case that there are key people around you that are great. They are fantastic as a person, but they are just in the wrong position. This simply happens naturally because their roles have evolved over time and without being formally designed. I think what is quite important is to try to understand who are these people, what are their capabilities, are they capable of what they're doing, should they maybe do something else instead. When I took over my first company, there was a very important lady that was pretty much head of our sales department. what she really was our culture carrier, right? She was a little bit the soul of our company. She was mission critical, keep this ecosystem together, but she was for sure no head of sales. So what I did was I kept her in the sales department, but I assumed the major decisions from this sales role myself and kept her more in the organization as the person that manages internal aspects and a few other marketing elements that she was also quite capable of doing. So she was inherited and she was not the right fit for her role. At the same time, she was absolutely mission critical, and we just had to, let's say, find a new way on how to make most use of her skills in our organization.
I think it's actually so important to stress that if you had not listened or given it enough time to understand what you inherited, you probably just have cut her loose and said, look, she's not fit for the role, so she needs to go, which would have ultimately been such a huge damage to the overall company and culture, because in these small businesses, culture carriers is someone you need to identify early on, and we see this across our portfolio as well. Now, there still will be people or personnel that you have to let go at some point. What would you advise a new CEO in such a situation, how to act, how to do it?
So my personal experience, it has proven to be quite successful to try to reflect with these people in one-to-one meetings and try to have them agree with me that they are not the right fit for the specific role they are currently assuming, right? And in the end, it's for the benefit of no one to be stuck in a specific role that just doesn't match. So I was actually quite successful in finding a common denominator with this person, that they should go out there and seek a new opportunity that is just a better natural fit. So we've always found a quite friendly constructive way forward in having several one-to-one dialogues about the situation to, in the end, agree upon a good solution that works for both parties.
What point, after having taken over the business, do you stop being the new owner and start being seen as the actual leader of the business?
I think that's quite a natural and gradual process, and it's funny to look back into my situation 9 years ago, because of course in the beginning I was in this super intense handover phase with the previous owner, and I remember how people naturally went to the other guy, right, that was just around for the past 30 years. And they didn't come to me as the new person, obviously, that was lacking all the experience back then. That was quite normal and probably will always be that case in all situations. But yeah, the more I grew into my role and the more small changes I successfully implemented with the team, and also the more absent the previous owner was, it felt super nice to see how people come to you with their problems and they are seeking your advice and they want you as the new leader to take a decision. So it was really a gradual process. It took a few months, right? 3 or 4 months until this transition was fully completed. And this is natural, of course, right? Because I mean, I stepped into this business. I had no clue of this operational business at all. I was a business guy back then, and it took a few weeks to master an enormous, steep learning curve into, you know, being able to speak with them at the same level about critical technical elements. It's a natural process, and it will happen eventually, and it feels very good when it's actually completed.
Now, you have been through the first 100 days yourself, and now you've watched other searchers go through it as well. If you could give one closing advice to a succession entrepreneur who is, let's say, 2 weeks from closing their first acquisition, not necessarily about the deal, but about the person they need to be in those first 100 days, what would it be?
I want to make 3 key points here. The first point, I've already mentioned it. I think just be humble, right? You've probably mastered a super challenging, complex transaction, and you probably also convinced yourself during the due diligence phase that you really understood this business. But the reality is you come from outside and the people inside the organization probably know the business much better than you are. Be humble, be open, be a good listener. The second one is be curious. It's just extremely important that when you come into this new ecosystem, that you try to understand every single aspect of the business and of its stakeholders. And the more successful you are in this respect, the more successful you will also be in implementing changes and long-term strategies on this basis. And then the third point, and probably the most important, have fun and enjoy the journey, right? I mean, in the end, this is a marathon, and you're not in it alone, right? You have a team around you. You have a team that will be joining you. I think it's just of critical importance to have fun along the way, enjoy it, and wake up full of energy and be appreciative for that opportunity that you can realize.
Be humble, be curious, and have fun. Julian, thank you so much for coming on the pod and sharing your story. Really appreciate your time, your support, and I hope to see you again with more wisdom and another topic soon. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks a lot, Carlos. Speak soon.